My name is Darlene Mahoney. I'm the National Digital Sales Director and with SeniorLivingGuide.com. And I also host a podcast, the SeniorLivingGuide.com podcast, which is a senior and caregiver resource podcast available anywhere you enjoy music. We also have at SeniorLivingGuide.com a national resource website for seniors and their families looking to find assisted living communities, independent, 55 plus, home care, all those different things. So we're able to connect our online users across the US with exactly what they're looking for in their backyard, and so that they can meet and look and find their own options, and then they connect directly with those folks that are on our website. So check out SeniorLivingGuide.com if you have an opportunity. And then we also have print publications, SeniorLivingGuide.com, in the state of North Carolina, the state of Virginia, the state of South Carolina, and the state of Florida. And those are all statewide publications. They're an incredible resource. They're perfect to fit in your pocket, in your pocketbook, or whatever the case may be, and share with others that are looking to find services in senior living options in their states. So definitely check that out. And then last but totally not least, we have a healthcare referral directory, which is available in about 40 plus markets across the US. And that's a really great opportunity to have everything in a one-stop with those hospital directories as well. So visit our website and you can find out more about those hospital directories and actually even find where they are. If anybody has any questions on any of that, my email that I'll send back to you post webinar will have my information, and you can contact me and I'll be able to share what up or answer any questions that you may have on any of those things that we just talked about. But as far as housekeeping notes, we are going to take all of your questions at the very end. So I know that if you are anything like I am, I'll have a question. And if I don't, go ahead and stick it in that Q&A box. By the end of the webinar, I will completely forgot what my question was. And then the webinar is all over and then it pops into my head. So as soon as it pops in, go ahead and put that down, but we will not be addressing them till the very end of the webinar. And with that, I'm going to introduce you to Laura Williams. She is with the Center for Vulnerable Voters, and she is going to be doing our webinar today. And I really want to thank her for joining us and all the information that she's going to share with everyone today.
Thank you, Darlene. Well, as she said, my name is Laura Williams. I've been an occupational therapist for about 27 years. 25 of those years have been serving senior citizens in a variety of settings, but mostly home care, assisted living, and long-term care facilities. So I joined Center for Vulnerable Voters probably about 18, 19 months ago after an activity director came into our therapy gym and asked us a voting related question, and we had no idea what she was talking about. So that led me on the journey to find out more information, and I discovered Center for Vulnerable Voters, and I joined them, like I said, about 18, 19 months ago, and here I am. So we are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, and we advocate for all types of vulnerable voters. And as you can see here in the slide, that includes our military, especially military overseas and their family, folks that are disabled, folks that are homeless, and also our residents that reside in all types of residential communities. So we enable vulnerable voter constituencies to protect their vote and exercise their civic right to participate in America's election process. And we also train and educate residential communities and skilled nursing staff on how to protect the voting rights of their residents, and especially their vulnerable residents. So I want to make a note that throughout the nation, some states use those are mail-in ballots, others use absentee ballots. So I'm going to be using that term interchangeably during this presentation. But know that when I say absentee ballots, I'm meaning a mail-in ballot. So we have a Senior Citizen Bill of Rights, and we believe it's important to keep this Bill of Rights forefront as you go to serve your residents and your seniors. So I'm going to go through this. The right to vote or not vote is the resident's choice, and theirs alone. They have a right to refuse assistance from unknown persons or persons they do not want help from. And that includes family, and election authorities. They have a right to privacy. No one has the right to ask them about their personal and private voting preferences or even to make a voting suggestion. So it's strictly confidential. They have a right to redress. If they believe that their rights have been violated, they can report this to their local election officials. They can contact us and we can help walk them through that process. And they also have a right to have candidates visit their community. So they have a right to ask those candidates questions, and the candidates need to hear their concerns. So I think we all know that residential communities are more susceptible to being taken advantage of in various areas. I've seen that in home care, where I've had to unfortunately turn in families for financial abuse. Just a week or two ago, I was at my assisted living and I walked in the assisted living memory unit, and there was a DME there trying to sell a resident with severe cognitive deficits a power wheelchair. So we know that they're more likely to be taken advantage of. So voting is no different. So there's 4 key terms that I think it's important for us to have a basic understanding of before we can learn how we can advocate for the people that we serve. So the first one is vote suppression. And that's a strategy or technique used to influence the outcome of an election by discouraging or preventing specific groups of people from voting. The next one is vote coercion or theft. And that's the use of intimidation or fear of reprisal to secure a vote for a specific candidate. And in some cases, the perpetrator simply completes the ballot without the voter's authorization. So an example of this, we had a family member, a daughter, call our hotline and report that her dad was receiving physical therapy services. And the physical therapist told her dad that anybody that votes for candidate X deserves to have their medication taken away from them. So that is a form of vote coercion. That's a form of intimidation. The next one is ballot harvesting, and that's the non-secure method of collecting absentee ballots during an election with the intent of dropping them off at the election office or the polling place. So it's legal in some states and it's illegal in other states. So I do have a legal guide for several states, and that will I will provide that to you if you want it, and that will define a little bit more your state specific laws regarding ballot harvesting. So ballot trafficking is the illegal collection or submission of election ballots. So an example of this is my aunt resides, she has property in 2 states. She has a home in 2 states. And a few years ago, she discovered that she had a ballot. She voted in 1 state, her primary state, but she also had a ballot cast in her previous state. So she had a ballot cast in her name in both states. So that is an example of illegal submission of an election ballot. So I was able to help her cancel her voter registration in her non-residential state. So residential communities can take steps to protect not only their residents, but also their staff and the facility. So these steps are to identify the needs of the residents, reviewing federal and state laws, using that Senior Bill of Rights as a guide, identifying any community vulnerabilities you may or may not have, implementing policies and procedures, and then monitoring and updating those policies and procedures. So the first step, identifying the needs of the residents. Again, we want to be sure that we're protecting their rights and their right to privacy. We want to be sure that we're honoring their wishes. Would they like to go to the polling place, or would they like an absentee or mail-in ballot? What are their mobility needs? And transportation. Does the facility have transportation to get residents to and from the polls. So I'm going to discuss the three main methods that most people use to vote. Now, please note that there are exceptions. So let's say if you have a resident that has a screen reader, they have their own computer, they have their own screen reader, they could possibly request a remote ballot to be sent to them, ensuring their privacy of vote because they can use their screen reader. There's also situations where, let's say, you have a loved one or a resident that was admitted to the hospital a couple days before Election Day. They can have a ballot delivered to them from the election authorities. So any unusual circumstances, any questions that you have, please contact your local election authority. So the three main methods of voting are in-person early voting at the polling place, and then in-person voting on election day at the polling place. And then we have our absentee, our mail-in voting. And some states have a provision for election authorities to provide supervised voting at your residential community. So for example, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Florida have laws that require local election authorities to provide that supervised voting per residential director request. Ohio and Arizona has a provision, but they leave it up to the local election authorities. And then, unfortunately, a state like Pennsylvania does not have that provision. So whether your resident votes in person early or in person on election day, so they're going to the polling place, there are federal laws that require that polling place to be handicap accessible. So if they are 75 years or older or disabled, they can move to the front of the line. Some states offer curbside voting. And if your state offers it, you want to arrange that ahead of time with your election authority. But what that is the senior, the resident would drive up, remain in the car, and the election authorities, one from each political party, would come out, and that resident would vote in the car or in their transport van. They should have wheelchair accessible booths. They should have seated voting. They should have assisted devices such as large ballot viewers and audio ballots. And then they have access to election authorities that are familiar with the voting assistance laws in that state. And a nice thing about early voting, it is often offers less wait time. Some of the benefits of in-person voting is that resident has access to those election authorities that are trained on election laws, and they can answer their questions accurately. It also ensures the privacy of the resident's vote. So we're going back to that the Bill of Rights. Those election authorities are familiar with the voting assistance laws. There are election authorities from both political parties that are present for checks and balances. It's ensuring the proper chain of custody of the ballot. So we don't have, a ballot coming into your facility and maybe you don't know where it's at. So proper chain of custody, the ballot remains at the polling place. It allows poll watcher citizens to observe the process and ensure that election laws are followed. And then, of course, this provides a protection for the residents, the staff, and the facility. Anytime the staff and the facility can separate themselves from the process, it's just an extra layer of protection for the staff and the facility. It's difficult to know the election laws. They change frequently, but those election authorities are trained on the election laws and are to adhere following those election laws. So the next step, after you've identified your residents' needs, is to review federal and state laws. So I received a lot of legal questions from residential directors. So earlier this year, we reached out to our legal team for, I think we have about 12 states, and they reviewed the voting assistance laws in those states. So I'm going to go through the federal laws, which would apply nationwide. So the federal laws per our voting assistance legal guide. So any voter who requires assistance to vote by reason of blindness, disability, or inability to read or write may be given assistance by a person of the voter's choice, other than the voter's employer or agent of that employer or officer or agent of that voter's union. So federal law defines a qualifying disability as a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. It's important to note that several states further define the term disability. So it's important to know your state laws. It's critical to note, or it's important to note that even under the federal exception for assisting disabled voters, the voter must still have the ability to make an effective request for assistance. So it's resident led. So the request for assistance must come from the voter. And that includes all aspects of the voting process. Last week, we received a question from a residential director, long story, but we sought legal clarification. And even for voter registration, a voter must make the request for assistance. For filling out a voter registration application, they must make a request for assistance for filling out a request for a mail-in ballot. And the voter must make the request for assistance for marking the ballot. So it's completely resident or senior led. So if the voter is unable to make such a declaration or offer instructions to the person assisting them concerning their desired vote choice, then assistance cannot be rendered. And as I mentioned earlier, some states offer provisions for election authorities to visit the community and provide the voting related services. And then many states have added additional provisions related to the voting assistance laws. So it's crucial to know these laws. And again, I will be happy to email a copy of this legal guide to their state specific legal guide to anybody that wants it. And again, we have and our legal guides are at no cost. I always forget that. I get that question a lot, but yes, we do not charge for any of our services. So once you've identified your residents' needs, reviewed your federal and state laws, we always want to keep that Bill of Rights as a guide. We want to keep that forefront. Again, they have a right to privacy, they have a right to vote, to not vote, they have a right to refuse assistance, they have a right to redress, and they have a right for candidates to come visit their community. So, number 4, you want to identify any vulnerabilities that your community may or may not have. So you want to ask yourself some questions. Am I aware of federal and state laws? Do I conduct yearly staff training regarding voting? Are there outside organizations coming into my community to assist residents? We at Center for Vulnerable Voters recommend that no outside organizations come into your community to assist residents. You want to continue to ask yourself, is there unmonitored assistance with ballot requests and submissions? Am I aware of where my resident's ballot is from the time it enters the community until it safely makes its way to the election office? So that's that ballot chain of custody. Are there outside organizations asking my staff to fill out ballots for residents or to collect their ballots? We've received calls from staff members stating that they were approached in their parking lot of their work and offered financial compensation to either collect residents' ballots, which is ballot harvesting, or to fill out a ballot for a resident. So they need to be made aware that this is going on and this is not okay. This is illegal. Do I know which residents are designated non-compos mentis, and do I have an extra layer of protection for them? So residents who cannot express they wish to vote in the election and or express their preferred candidate should not have a ballot application filled out for them or a ballot marked for them. So again, identifying residents' needs, be sure to review those federal and state laws. Keep that Senior Bill of Rights forefront in your mind. Identify any vulnerabilities your facility or community may or may not have. And then you want to look at implementing those policies and procedures, which we know policies and procedures protect the residents, they protect the staff, and they also protect the community. So we recommend enacting protocols to protect the residents from possible vote suppression and fraud. Create training programs to teach staff which constitutes vote suppression and vote fraud. Educating staff on voting laws in your state, as well as the penalties for violating these laws. Teaching staff it is never okay to tell a resident who to vote for. It's illegal. Creating procedures which are monitored to protect the chain of custody of absentee ballots. And again, knowing which residents are non-compos mentis and ensuring you know your state and federal voting policies for these residents. And staff should not request or mark a ballot for residents who cannot express they wish to vote in the election or cannot express their preferred candidate. We need to be aware of and enforce ballot assistance laws. And then protect your staff and residents from outside groups. You know, what are these outside groups' intentions? We had a director, I think it was about 3 or 4 weeks ago, call me up and told me that, hey, this has happened twice at my community, that an activist group has came in and impersonating our local election authorities, trying to get access to our residents. So we need to make sure we're aware of what these outside group intentions are. So we actually have, we actually put an alert out. So if you sign up on our website for our newsletter, we send out alerts. So we send an alert out to everybody on the, I think there's about 5,000 residential directors. We send an alert out to all the directors saying, hey, this was brought to our attention from another director. This is just something for you to be aware of. So back to, sorry, sidetrack there. Back to implementing policies and procedures. So you want to protect residents from organizations that want to help residents fill out ballot applications and ballots. And then be sure and instruct staff how to protect absentee ballots from ballot harvesters and traffickers, and create procedures to protect your residents' ballots. And then obviously we want to recognize those staff who exemplify best practices and are really advocating and protecting their residents' voting choices. And again, residents who cannot respond to their name should not be given a ballot, and residents who cannot either express that they wish to vote in the election or cannot indicate their preferred choice on the ballot should not have a ballot marked for them. So I was at an event and I had two directors come up to me separately and asked my recommendation on how to handle a situation with family members that are voting for their loved one. So it is illegal to vote for another person, even if you are their spouse, their medical power of attorney, their legal guardian, their financial power of attorney. It doesn't matter. You cannot vote for another person. So we recommend that if that has happened at your facility, or maybe you feel that it possibly could happen, that you do everything you can to prevent that. Educate those family members. We have an assisted loved ones flyer that you can share in your community. You can contact your ombudsman to intervene before a situation arises. You can always seek advice from your legal counsel. The states that offer election authorities to come into the facility, that might be a great preventative measure. So for example, like in North Carolina, if a resident's family member requests a ballot, the election authorities deliver that ballot to that facility. So sometimes just having the presence of election authorities can be a good preventative measure if you feel that there might be a family situation that's questionable. With all that said, we do recommend that you treat it as any other form, any concern of suspected illegal activities involving family members should be referred to your facility's legal counsel, the local authorities, and your residents' ombudsman. Obviously, try and do all you can to prevent it. And then once you've taken all these steps, it's important to monitor and update those policies and procedures. So I want to share, because it's been helpful to other directors, some policies and procedures that directors have implemented, and these are throughout the United States. So I have about 9 or 10 of them here. So I'm just going to read them off. So we document the name, address, phone, and email of all individuals that come into the community for any voting related discussions. Our staff chart all interactions and discussions related to the voting process, and there is always 2 staff present, with 1 being a director. We inform families of all aspects of the voting process when we transport residents to the polling place and when election authorities will be at the community. All mobile residents are transported to the early voting polling center. The residents that have vote by mail ballots to mail are transported to the local drop box outside the election authority office, and the residents place their ballot in the drop box. All mail-in ballots are locked and stored in the director's office till the election authorities arrive or until the resident is ready to complete their ballot independently. We only allow election authorities to conduct voting. We have a strict policy that we do not allow any outside organizations to come into the facility for any voting related activities. It is against the rules for staff to discuss politics with residents, and they're not allowed to wear political clothing. We perform yearly staff training with additional training 2 months before presidential elections. And we work with election authorities to be notified of who in the facility is receiving a mail-in ballot, when to expect it, and we document the chain of custody while it's in our facility. I always like to share these tips. We recommend that each senior receive a senior bill of rights, and that way they can advocate for themselves. We think it's important to educate residents and seniors on how to recognize official election mail. So it is legal in some states for third-party organizations to send out voter application forms, ballot application requests to seniors and residents, to anyone, with the intent of that application making it back to the election authorities. We recommend that you utilize only applications, forms, any voting related material from your local election office. And the way you can tell that is this official election mail will be on the outside of the envelope. It's important to educate residents and seniors on how they can track their ballots if they're voting by mail. And they can do this, some states have this online, or they can call their local election office and say, hey, I made a request for a mail-in ballot. Did you get it? Or, hey, I mailed my ballot back. Did you get it? They have every right to do that. We think it's important to educate residents and seniors on the importance of canceling their previous voter registration after they move, as in the example of my aunt. I was asked to share too, that you can research your vote history or loved one's vote history on voteref.com, but not all states participate. And then some resources. So we have a Their Vote Matters guide. It's a residential facility and skilled nursing home staff training guide that helps identify vulnerabilities, helps with policy and procedure implementation. We have that Senior Citizen Bill of Rights, which is a guide for directors and a handout for residents and seniors. We have that Assisted Loved Ones. That's that guide for family and friends. And then we also have our state-specific legal guide. The state-specific legal guides are not on our website, so you need to email me to request a copy. The reason it's not on our website is because these laws frequently change. We recently updated the Pennsylvania one. So if you were on a webinar with me 2 weeks ago, that has changed already. So that's why we do not put those on the website, because it's so hard to get those removed, and we just want everything to be as up to date as possible. So you can go to our website to find state-specific laws, but they're not going to be the legal guide specific to residential voting. And then you can find some federal laws on our website too. And then on our website, there's articles now for residential directors. You can sign up for the newsletters. I can tell you, I don't send out a lot of newsletters, but we do newsletters and alerts. So we will send out the alerts as residential directors alert us to concerns that we think the other residential directors would want to be aware of. And as I mentioned with Pennsylvania just recently, laws frequently change. So be sure to stay up to date and seek the advice of your legal counsel to ensure recent changes have not altered your obligations. And again, just email me and I will send you the state-specific guideline for your state.
Perfect. Well, we do have a lot of questions, Laura. So I'm going to go through those and we'll get some of these answered for these folks. And also as I'm scrolling up to kind of start pulling out some of these questions for you to answer, we will be sending all these links and information. I'll send that in an email as well. So you'll get an email from me tomorrow with the actual webinar as well, and then contact information. So if you missed any of that, or there was too much HTTPSs, then no worries. I'm going to go ahead and send that to you tomorrow. So it'll be in your inbox. Let's see here. So we do have a lot of questions or people requesting to have that information available to them, so they can pull that tomorrow when I send that email for specifically the legal guides in different states.
Okay. I'll drop my email in the chat too.
Yeah, perfect, perfect. So also, one of the questions is the ballot considered complete if the resident is only interested in the presidential position and chooses to leave other positions not chosen?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You can vote for one, two, you can vote, you don't have to vote for each position. And
I
you
know
can
I don't
act,
always vote for all of them. Some of
yeah,
them I don't know who they are.
yeah. You can actually submit a blank ballot also. So if you
Okay.
have, if I've had that happen a couple times because I do healthcare facility voting, where a resident's, looking at me and they're like, I don't know who any of these people are. I don't want to do this. And I'm like, you don't have to.
Mhm.
And in our state, we just simply write across the ballot, does not want to participate, unable to participate, and we just submit it. And
Okay.
it's obviously not counted, but yeah.
Right. So, question, and this was one I actually had as well, just listening to some of the information you were sharing with us today. Are you allowed to ask them if they would like to vote, or do they need help with voting? I know you have to wait for them to ask, but can you say, "Hey, do you need help with that?" Is that something you're allowed to do?
According to the legal team, the resident needs to ask for assistance.
Okay.
So they need to ask for, let's say you have a table with a form for voter registration.
Hmm.
Um, the resident needs to come up to you or just say, hey, I need some help filling this out. The same with a ballot application form to request a mail-in ballot, and the same with marking the ballot. So it has to be all resident led. So they
Right.
have to ask you for that help.
Okay. And then I had a question. I don't know if you can answer this one, but we'll certainly ask. Do you recommend sharing the presidential debates as an activity?
Oh boy. I know
I
I
am
get
refraining from a comment on that one.
yeah, I get this question a lot on how do I properly share information?
Right,
How do I fairly share information about candidates?
right,
Um, and I don't know that answer besides inviting the candidates to come. Now, obviously, your presidential candidates are probably not going to come. Um,
right.
you could sure try. Heck, you never know. Um, I can't answer that. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like that would be something, yeah, I wouldn't want to put my stamp on that one. So question, do you happen to have information regarding resident rights to vote while on a conservatorship in California? Resident is found to be gravely disabled, but the conservatorship letters do not state that the resident is mentally incompetent. That's
So
a big one.
I do not. What we recommend in those situations um, is the only way your vote can be taken away is by court of law.
Oh, wow.
We strongly recommend going back to that statement. If a resident is unable to express a desire to vote in the election, or they are unable to express their preferred candidate, then an application or a ballot should not be marked for them,
Mhm.
regardless of their voter registration status, regardless of their, if they have a POA, if they have a guardian.
Right.
Go back to that statement.
Okay. And then can you restate the name of the office to contact to have election poll workers come to your facility? They're specifically in Wisconsin, so I don't know if that makes a difference or.
That's going to be your local board of elections. If you want to shoot me an email, I can help you locate them.
Yes. Okay.
I do that a lot. So just shoot me an email. I can help you locate your board of elections and get you some information.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. And then if a resident has dementia but knows their name but doesn't know anything about political world or understanding of the world around them or even knows where they are, should they vote? I know that that's the loaded question I think a lot of people have.
It is the loaded question.
Yeah.
So you want to go back. I don't need to sound like a broken record. But you want to go back to, is that resident expressing a desire to vote? Are they able to freely tell you who their preferred candidate is? Are they approaching you and saying, I want to vote, I need some help?
Right.
Those are the questions you want to,
Okay.
ask yourself.
Yeah. It is a hard one with dementia and cognitively impaired folks because I know that my dad, he actually knew who the president was, but my mom had passed away like 6 months prior. He thought had been passed away for over 30 years. So he clearly had a lot of confusion. And I'm not even sure if he could tell me if he voted or didn't vote for the president at the time.
Yeah.
So what is an appropriate way to keep track of the chain of custody for a ballot? Or would that depend on on a specific state?
Oh, to keep track of the chain of custody of a ballot in your facility, or
yes, I'm assuming
general?
that's the question. Yes.
Okay. So you can reach out to if you're in a facility, you can reach out to your election authorities and see if they will work with you on when they're sending the ballots out to your residents. So that way you can um, just keep track of where they're at. When are they arriving? Who delivered them to the resident's room? Is the resident voting right away? Just kind of, we recommend just keeping, and each facility is going to be different. It's going to be based on your residents, the facility, the resident's needs. Are they in a assisted living with their own apartment? Are they in a nursing home with two or three people in a room?
Yeah.
It's going to be different per facility. So some states will also publicly list who has requested a ballot on what day, when it is sent out, and when it was received back to the election authority. So that's one way that you can do that. If your election authority says they're too busy to help you with that. It's really going to vary per facility. If you wanted to shoot me an email with a little bit more specifics, like, are you in an independent, assisted living, or what? I could probably guide you a little bit more because each facility is so different. Each situation is so different.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the questions, and this is a good one as well, because I actually thought of this. Is it okay to go around and ask residents if they would like to vote, or do they need just to tell you that they want to vote to start? I'm pretty much, I think, just kind of start the process.
Yeah, I get that question a lot, and I haven't got a clear answer. I can tell you what our facility does, which I like, is our activity director puts it on the calendar. Makes a note, hey, absentee voting has started, early voting has started, and given a date, has the date on there. And then she makes an announcement at lunch.
Right.
I think twice, and then says, hey,
like an activity or an update of what's going on in that.
What's going on. Yeah. And she says, if you'd like to vote, if you need assistance, reach out to me. And she leaves it at that.
Yeah. So this is an interesting question. Is there a way to find out if someone can vote or if their voting rights have been taken away? I feel like that only, and I could be completely wrong.
So your election authorities are going to know that.
Okay.
They should have a list of somebody that's maybe been adjudicated by a court of law. They've been deemed incompetent to vote. They should have a list of that, of those folks, and they should not be receiving a ballot.
Right.
As far as obtaining that information, I'm not sure.
Right.
Can't answer that.
Right. So this is something that's a good one as well. In a previous facility, we were asked to ask residents if they wanted to take part in supervised voting. Is that appropriate? And this was specific to long-term care.
Yes, because your supervised voting teams, they're going to set up a polling place. So they will bring the ballots out to the residents that have requested the ballots. And
Mhm.
they will, just like a polling place, Sue will come up to the election authority. They'll verify who Sue is. They'll hand her the ballot. And then if Sue needs assistance, she will turn around to the election authority and say, I need help with this. And the election authorities will help them. Otherwise, they'll go to a table, fill it out, return it back to the election authorities.
Mhm.
That's how the majority of the supervised voting is. They're
Right.
not going to automatically help them because they also have to wait for the residents or the voter to say, hey, I need some help. I can't see this, or I have a tremor. I can't fill this out. Can you help me?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I didn't even think about that part. Um, and then here's a comment and a question. We have a 102-year-old years young. I love it.
Oh,
She said that she would like to vote, but doesn't know anything about the candidates. The family's requested the ballots for her. She's legally as blind as well. What should that approach be? What would that would be appropriate?
so if the you said the if you said the family requested the ballot,
Yes.
I would leave it up to the family. See if you can get the family to provide some information. Um, Unless you have concerns with the family.
Hmm.
But it sounds like the 102-year-old young, I love it. Um, it sounds like she's expressed a desire to vote.
Hmm.
So I would maybe let the family know, hey, she's wanting some information on the candidates. Can you
That's a
help
good one.
provide that to her so she can
Right.
make an informed choice? And
Yeah. And then clarification. Are the communities obligated to let family members know, power of attorney, et cetera, that they will be having voting assistance agencies coming into the communities memory care to assist residents with voting?
I don't think I don't want to speak as if I'm an attorney, but from what I understand is you're not obligated. However, I would strongly recommend it. I have had a couple directors come up to me and share experiences where, like, for one, um, they had election authorities come in, provided ballots, residents filled out our ballot for application for a ballot. They filled it out, sent it back to the election authorities. Then in this particular state, immediate family members could request a ballot for their loved ones. The family requested a ballot, and the election authorities told the family somebody already has. The family went to the police. So for about an hour, it was a little touch and go.
Mhm.
Everything turned out fine, but I think it's important just to let family members know. And I'm not saying you have to pick up the phone and call each one of them, but I mean, posting it in the facility, I would think, somewhere, or maybe you have a newsletter.
Yeah,
Just
yeah, that makes sense. And with asking for assistance in order to have them sign up for assisted supervised voting, are you allowed to ask them then?
so if the request in most states, North Carolina, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, North Carolina, Wisconsin, and Florida, I know for sure, the request for supervised voting comes from the director. So if you know that you have one or two residents that are interested in voting, I would pick up the phone and call your local election authorities and say, I would like to have a team come out and maybe do a voter registration. Make
Mhm.
sure that those that want to vote have updated information. Has anybody moved in? Let's get it all updated.
Mhm.
Then the election authorities will usually take the next step, usually at the same visit, not necessarily, um, and help provide the residents with an application for a ballot. And then they would provide that assistance if the resident requests it. So under most states, the residential director makes the request for the supervised voting team to come out. Or so email me and I can send you your state because it's state specific.
Right.
There's another state that just popped in my head that the resident has to ask for a supervised voting team. that they could ask the residential director and the director can make the request. So that way there's not 10 residents calling the election authority
Right.
for the same facility, so
Right.
again, it just has to be, resident led. The resident has to express a desire to vote and then ask for that assistance.
Okay. I have someone that asked this question, and I think I know the answer. I'm going to ask you this anyway. Are facilities required to provide transportation to the polls and without charging?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know
Yeah.
if they're required.
Yeah.
I mean, if I know there's a lot of facilities that I've spoke to that they just don't have a vehicle. They just don't have,
Right.
they don't have transportation, period.
There's so, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, if a resident wants to go to the polls, I would try to make every effort
Mhm.
that you can. I would be sure if you're reaching out to like VA organizations, church organizations, just make sure it's not, be cognizant that that you're watching for an activist organization. You don't want an activist organization to pick up your resident and try and influence them.
Right.
Um,
So I
I
have
wish I
two
had
more. Oh, I'm
I
so
wish I
sorry.
had I wish I had a better answer for that. I don't.
Yeah, yeah, I didn't know that that would be something you could make a community or facility do.
That
If
is,
there are certain, and I don't know what this is, so maybe you can answer this question. Is there a certain BIMs level that should not
um,
be allowed to vote? So I'm not sure what that actually
it's
means.
a BIM score. So
Okay.
it's a score that I know a lot of residential directors are looking at that. But again, the only way someone can be deemed incompetent to vote and have their voting rights taken away is by court of law. So again, I don't mean to keep repeating myself, but if you go back to the residents who cannot respond, they can't respond to their name, they shouldn't be given a ballot. Residents that cannot either express that they wish to vote in the election, they cannot indicate their preferred choice on the ballot, should not have a ballot marked for them.
Yeah. So this is my next question. So in a long-term care facility, are they allowed to go room to room and ask they would like to take, if they would like to vote and take mail-in ballots into the room to complete, or do they just need to come to a more private place, like a makeshift polling place?
Um, if that person can email me, I'm not sure if they're referring to the election authorities or the staff.
Right. Yeah.
You can email me that.
Okay.
I mean, ideally you want to maintain the privacy of the vote the best you can.
Yeah.
I can give you an example of when I did healthcare facility voting earlier this year. We had we were in a nursing home, two residents. They were both, pretty much bed bound, or they were going to be a difficult transfer to get out of bed, like a Hoyer lift.
Right.
We pulled the curtain and just did the best we could
Mhm.
with maintaining the privacy of the vote. I don't know if that answers your question, so
Yeah.
email me.
I like that. And the good news is if there's any more questions that people have after this, they can definitely reach out to you. And as I mentioned, tomorrow I will be sending a link to the webinar, and then also have all of those different resources available in that webinar as well, or in that email as well, with Laura's information and contact information. So please definitely look for that tomorrow in your email. And until then, I think that that's going to be it for us. I think that's going to be a wrap on this webinar. And I really want to thank you, Laura, for joining us. This is such an important topic, especially this time of year, especially this close to the election. So I do appreciate your time.
And I want to thank everybody out there for advocating for the seniors, for the residents, for the loved ones. We need to be really really watching out for each other.
Absolutely.
It's important.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and have an amazing rest of your day.